Welcome to another episode of Moonshots. As you know, in Moonshots, we bring amazing guests with phenomenal, audacious ideas where they believe everything is possible. And today's episode is no different. Today, I have an amazing guest, Mark Metry. Mark is a great human being, and his moonshot is something we're going to find out in very soon. So, Mark, welcome to Moonshots.
Naveen, this is crazy. This is like an out-of-body experience for me. Thank you for having me.
So, I have known you for quite some time as a guest on your podcast called Humans 2.0. First of all, it's an amazing podcast. If you guys have not heard it, everyone should go there and subscribe to it. It's one of the best podcasts out there where you bring in the guests and really get the best out of them. And you are a great interviewer. So if anyone who wants to be a guest on that, please contact. How would they contact you, Mark?
Email me, mark@vudream.com.
There you go. So if you want to be a guest on his podcast, reach out to him, but definitely subscribe to it because he's an amazing interviewer.
Thanks.
So, Mark, I'm going to turn the table on you because you've always been the other side of the table here. So, what is your moonshot?
Yeah. So my moonshot is I want to provide 1 billion people with access to mental health, mental wellness tools and resources. And I can tell you why. For me growing up, I had a great, bringing up, but obviously, we all have different kinds of troubles and so on and so forth. And, for me, I really struggled with my mental health, really struggled with anxiety and even depression at a young age. And I never heard the words depression or anxiety. I never understood what they meant. And it wasn't until I really fell in a really dark time in my life where I was able to, almost wake up out of the reality that I had created for the first 18 years of my life. And I was able to venture off into new territory. And I've been able to learn all these new things about how we can create our reality. And I want, the 13-year-old version of me to know that there is potential in this. There is a future in this. You don't have to be this way forever. And so I wake up every morning and in every single way that I, is possible to me, try to make that happen for other people.
Well, Mark, first of all, that's an amazing moonshot because you live in this world today where addiction and the mental diseases have become an epidemic. I mean, this is what is killing people. We have lost so many great human beings to suicides and people who are suffering from depression and anxiety. And I don't want to take this lightly, but what is it that causes people to have this anxiety and depression? How would they know in the earliest possible stage that they are having it? And then I want to really ask you, what could they do? I mean, in your moonshot, what would they do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of great questions. And, I think for me, growing up, looking back at it now, I think, you're sort of able to know if you're anxious or not, if it feels like you don't fit. So like forever, my entire life, I always had like this feeling like things were off, always. And it wasn't until I was able to actually look at the root cause, which is the mind. Instead, I was always looking at, I was anxious because this person yelled at me, or it was because of I'm in this environment. And another massive factor is just looking at, your overall well-being. I had countless issues with like GI, my appendix, all throughout, my life. And if you are looking at yourself and you have issues with your stomach, problems sleeping, that's a massive one. I remember as a kid, could never fall asleep. Sometimes I would have nights where I would close my eyes and then my mind would just go off and off and off and off. And I really think a big part of that, Naveen, was I didn't have anything to set it on. I didn't have a moonshot that I was tackling. I didn't have a major life goal that I was heading to. So I think the sort of the raw talent, the fire that was inside of me was not being used in the right way. And it wasn't until I was able to, really hit a rock bottom. I think you can catch people in, beginning and medium situations where it's not as bad. But for me, I really, hit this moment of my life where, I was neglecting so many different things that eventually they caught up to me. My bad, eating habits, my issues that I had with like substances and alcohol, the issues that I had with behavioral. I know food was really big for me, just because I grew up in like in a family that didn't really have a lot of money at all. So the one thing that we could afford that was maybe a little bit luxurious, junk food, a ton of crap. And when you look at today's world, you see, 800,000 people commit suicide every year, which is awful. And it really, what it gets me to think, Naveen, it's like, how many of those people had a moonshot inside of them? Yeah. How many, 800,000 moonshots could we have had? And I know that a lot of people that struggle with mental health that are suicidal, but eventually turn themselves out, they end up doing some really, really amazing things that I think is not attainable for the average person. And so, for me, I think a massive part of my moonshot is addressing health physiology. Viome, the gut microbiome, is a massive, massive factor. I know some people that have had a lot of issues with their mental health. They did Viome, completely change the perspective. It's not a magic pill by any means, but really looking at that physiological component, especially I think in a world today in 2019 where industries have gotten so, especially with our food, has gotten so industrialized. We're consuming things that we've never been meant to consume. We're consuming things that didn't exist 500 years ago. That's interacting with our body and all of our cells, and there's some kind of dysfunction. There's some kind of unbalance, right? And so I think physiology is a massive part of it. And on top of that, I think a big factor is I grew up. So for example, when I look back at my life and I ask, why do I have all this anxiety? Health was a massive part of it. But also at the same time, I grew up in a small town outside of Boston that had almost, very small town, had almost a 99.99% white Caucasian population. And, my parents immigrated here from this country. We moved to this town. And so my brain, my primitive organ, was giving me the signal of everybody around you looks different. Therefore, you must be some kind of different, weird, outside, outcast perspective. And so I've really been learning about the concept of, if you want to have your mental health right, you've really got to almost fit into a community like a puzzle piece. And, if you look back at old societies, they used to do that. They would have a village. This person would make, this person would catch fish. This person would make nets and they'd trade with each other. But I think a massive part of that has slowly been fizzled out, or for some people in some areas at least. Yeah. And I think we're beginning to see that, like in areas where, outside of cities, there's, massive addiction problems. I'm from Boston. I know in Massachusetts, there's the opiate crisis, which is massive, which, half healthcare system, but then half personal responsibility and what that actually means. And I think the more we can push this message out there and actually let people know this is a possibility that you can control. You're not just in this movie scene. You're not just in this picture of life. You can actually begin to change it by, adjusting some knobs and layers here. Some of them might be sleep. Some of them might be nutrition. Some of them might be meditation. Some of them might be, embracing spirituality and trying to find that a spot. And I really think, similar to, what we were talking about before with the gut microbiome and having that, unbalance, I also think that there can be unbalance that can happen, that can come out as a mental health issue if a lot of these foundational pieces like community, like spirituality, like, nutrition, if those are not solved. So my best hope here is to, try to highlight those people and then also try to find my own solutions in the best way that I can. And, I've been hosting this podcast and I've been trying to highlight the right kinds of people that we should be following to bring us the most impact. And, Viome, massive tool for mental health.
Well, Mark, first of all, thanks for sharing this. This is a message that people need to hear. If people who are suffering through anxiety, they tend to blame themselves, and rather than thinking that there is something is there outside, how would they go about, what's the first step someone needs to take? People who have depression or anxiety, what's the first thing they do when they want to take control back?
Yeah, absolutely. So I interviewed this great neuroscientist, Dr. Rick Hansen, and he told me that the desire or the pursuit of an experience usually does not happen unless somebody has experienced that thing in the first place. And what he really means is, if you want to shift your current perspective, you can't really think your way out of it. Like you said, if you sit there and you think, you're just gonna be in this feedback loop with your brain of, it's my fault, why am I this way? Why is this happening to me? My life sucks. And so I remember for me, really one of the first experiences that I had where I sort of began to understand a little bit about who I really am was my high school graduation that, I had with some friends and family. I had a chance to talk, to speak for, to maybe about like 50, 70 people. Again, this is back when I was very, very socially anxious, never really looked up at anyone. I was the shy kid in the back. And I got the chance to, give this speech that I had written about really important stuff. And I remember when I was doing that, I didn't feel anxious, and I felt like this control, and I felt almost like this nuclear bomb, like this fire in a good way was sort of started, was triggered, was sparked inside of me. And ever since that moment, and I had access to that initial experience, I was always like, wait, so why am I anxious like here walking down the hallway or talking to this person, but why wasn't I anxious talking to, a crowd of people about something that I really, really love? And so if you can put yourself in an experience like that, that's gonna completely begin to reshift, the normal operating system of your mind and what your perception usually tells you. And so if you can, on a one moment of courage, get yourself to commit, maybe with a friend, to go take a class or to go do something that you would normally never do, I think that's a great first step, because I think it's all about breaking patterns. And aside from that, aside from actually experiencing something different other than your current reality, another massive, part that you need to begin to understand is that, we now live in a time where all knowledge, all expertise from some of the world's top leading experts is now available out there. So you can literally Google on your phone, how do I stop being anxious? And you're gonna see an article that's gonna have 9 things. It's probably gonna say, maybe start exercising, because if you have a lot of pent up energy that your body is creating, you need to have an outlet for that. And if you don't find an outlet, the energy is just gonna stay inside and you're gonna be anxious. Go try mindfulness meditation. Oh, let me go download this app. Let me go take this class. And I think these are all steps that somebody can begin to understand to really get that there is hope, right? I think hope is really one of the most important things. I remember when you said on my podcast, when somebody's hopeless, they don't think that tomorrow is going to be any better than yesterday. And that's how you get people to do things from, suicide all the way to terrorism. And I think if we can, acknowledge that and somehow give people that in as many formats as we possibly can, whether that's from, social media to podcasts to TV to, having celebrities and people that in the old form of media, like on TV, we saw like these actors as these perfect figures, people that don't have any flaws. But now we're seeing a lot of them with social media talk about, mental health and talk about, Michael Phelps is talking about therapy. And I think as many ways as we can do that and begin to shift culture, then I think we can slowly begin to reverse people's, negative perception of, I have anxiety, there's nothing I can do with this, I'm broken, I'm a fixed image, and actually have hope and begin taking action in the now for a better tomorrow.
Well, I'm going to ask you one more question and this is just, again, I'm thinking about a lot of the parents who are listening to this. How would they know that the child may be going through something, because the child rarely is going to come to mom and dad, hey, mom and dad, I'm really depressed or I'm really anxious. And then one day that child is gone, and then your parents go through their life looking and thinking, what could have they done differently? What could they have seen? So what are the things that they could be watching out for? And is it belonging to a family system, having a strong family, is it a discouragement or encouragement to essentially solving this problem?
That's a great question. And I get this question all the time, especially when we live in a world today where if a kid is considered different, they're almost sort of immediately diagnosed and adiosed away. And I think that can be really scary for parents and for kids too. And I remember when I was a kid, I never went to my parents and said, hey, I'm anxious. I didn't know what that was. Sometimes they would ask me, they're like, hey Mark, we're seeing you're acting this certain way, or you're not talking the same. Like, did everything in school happen okay today? And when I look back at it, I would, almost never say, talk to them ever. And to be honest with you, it wasn't only until my parents started to talk and be transparent about their own problems and their own issues. My parents, amazing parents, they love me. I think, they're a great reason why I didn't end up being a statistic. But, they obviously had their issues. And, when they came to this country, they had a lot of issues with, money, getting, moving to different apartment buildings all the time. And so at times, the household was definitely stressful, but it wasn't until my parents were honest and straight up and transparent with me, and they're saying like, hey Mark, today at work, this, I had a moment to myself and I realized, I was getting frustrated at myself because of this moment, but then I actually realized it was my brain telling this. And, once my parents started talking to me like that, that's really where I began to open up.
How old were you at that time, Mark?
Man, maybe like 15, 16.
So is that a good time for parents to have that discussion?
Probably earlier. Okay. I think as early as you can get them is possible. And I think, like you said, there's no straight up field manual for parents. Yeah. But I think if you can have an open mind and understand that, another big point that I want to mention is like pressure, right? A lot of parents, I think today, are putting a lot of pressure on their kids. You have to go to this school, you have to be this job, and it's always started from good intentions. It's always because they love them. But I think a lot of the times what's happening is when these parents are saying that to their kid and their kid says, okay, now I have to go do this, I have to go obey my mom and dad, they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. It may not necessarily be that dream or that moonshot that that kid wants to go on because there's that lack of communication, because the parent hasn't even asked what the kid really wants to go into. And so I think a big part of it is just opening up that field of communications with your kid, having that conversation, and then also understanding that, my opinion is, your kids are not, you don't own them. They're not sheep. You can't tell them to go over here, to go over here. And I think once you can have that mutual respect, it could be much better. And, as I began to go into this, I realized that the problem is actually much more deep rooted, and looked into this. A lot of the times, parents may act this way because, their parents before them acted them in this way. It may be because this parent is in a certain, social group where all the other kids are getting into this college or they're doing this thing, and they start to get caught up in the sense of peer pressure. And then that trickles down into the kid, and it gives them a large, sense of anxiety that they are not actually the ones in control of their life. And that is massive. And then other than that, I think a massive part of it, again, is food. Like, school lunches are awful. And I think a big part of that of, giving these kids all these chemicals and processed foods and, aside from the natural whole foods, a massive part of that, is, giving a kid a bag of candy, basically a bag of drugs, and then expecting them to not run around all day is kind of crazy. And then, diagnosing them and medicating them. And so I think those are massive approaches that parents can take with their kids.
It's just very interesting. I just wanted to talk about one subject, being different. And anyone who has been an immigrant in this country would realize that when we come here, we are different. And to some extent, that can be a source of anxiety. But for me, actually became a source of strength. What I realized was being different is what makes me different, that I'm not like anyone else. And if you look at this hierarchical pyramid, there is a CEO on top and there are all the other people. If I am like everyone else, I'm going to be at the bottom of the pyramid. To go up to the thing top, you have to be different. So being different is okay. Even today, I could hire a speech therapist to teach me to talk like everyone else, to speak like everyone else, but that will make me like everyone else. And I don't care if you don't understand what I'm saying. That's okay by me. You're going to learn to understand me just like I learned to understand them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And now I am 100% in line with your perspective. And really what I think it was is for me, I personally, I believe in God. And, I personally think that, the experiences that I had in my younger years with anxiety, I think that was really God putting me in a test every single day and asking me, do you have the courage to be yourself, or do you just want to blend in the background? Because those people that blend in the background and are the same, they're the ones that grow up and, they don't have the same. And if you want to do different things, you have to develop a different mindset. You have to develop different habits. And I really feel like that beginning part was really just training ground for me to what I really embody today, which is 100%. It's the ultimate advantage, being an immigrant, growing up differently, doing different things. Because for the longest time, I didn't want anybody to know who I was. When people asked me where I was from, I wouldn't even tell them. I would lie. I would make up something. And it really wasn't until I was able to, truly understand what I just said, then I was able to use it towards my advantage every single day. I love that.
So another thing that I was going to say was that the kids are so overdiagnosed. I remember our children when they were young, they have ADHD and they wanted to put them on drugs. And I just said, excuse me, they are just smart kids, really bored. Is they now have ADHD and not going to give them drug. And my point is, do you think, and again, I'm going to be very controversial, do you believe the parents take easy way out and put the kids on drugs so they don't have to deal with it?
Honestly, I definitely think for some people that are aware of it, I totally agree. And another thing that I'll tell you is I was having this conversation with somebody, and this person has their kid go to a private school, very, very high, they're very expensive, with a ton of other smart kids, supposedly. And he was telling me, I put my kid on that because all the other kids are in the same thing. It literally gives them an advantage. And I think it's crazy. And I think I love technology so much. You know this. I think technology has been working alongside humanity to improve our quality of life. But I also think that, with this specific use of this technology, I also think that it is making people, giving them the illusion to sort of live life whatever and live without consequences. And the matter of the fact is, like, if you don't want your kid to, go around screaming, or, maybe you should give them more attention. Maybe you should actually talk to them. Maybe you should, help them, find their way. Maybe you should, look at and help them get healthier. Maybe they shouldn't be, downing a bag of candy. And like, there's countless stories of where I've heard of where it's like, oh my God, what are we actually doing to these kids? And what is it going to make them do like later in the future? What are the future side effects when they're like 40 years old? So
Mark, as we wrap up, I want to ask you about a subject we haven't quite touched yet.
Okay.
You do this podcast, Humans 2.0. What is Humans 2.0?
Humans 2.0 is an idea that I began to discover when I went from over 200 pounds, not being able to look at anybody, very anxious, depressed, even suicidal. And then I was able to sort of look at myself like a year later, and a ton of accomplishments, but more importantly, truly happy. Mental peace, having a quiet mind, which is something I never had access to. And when I saw, just looking back at myself, I was like, wow, how is this kid that was super, messed up way back when, how is he able to do that? Man, this is almost like a different, software version. And, I grew up in computer science, kind of heavy. And so that was the way that I thought. And so I was like, hey, if I can do this, maybe I could project this idea, this mental model out there to the world, and then constantly bring in evidence, examples of different guests of how they in their lives were, faced with certain struggles and issues, but were able to find a way, able to, bring their moonshot into, fruition. And so, yeah, that's been the entire idea. And, every day I sort of seeing it more and more come out, whether it's, people that like I see on Instagram that say like, oh yeah, I wasn't going to go to the gym today, but then I did it, #humans 2.0. Like that is what a human 2.0 is. It's somebody that is constantly willing to push themselves to that next level while also understanding that it's a process that never really ends. And I think when you can understand that, and you understand that there is no, finish line or arriving in life, you get a lot happier. And then you also get, I think, a lot smarter about what you're doing today in the now.
Well, first of all, if you have not heard Humans 2.0, please go and subscribe to Humans 2.0. Follow Mark Metry, amazing, great human being, a great guy. You will learn tremendously, not just from him, but also from his guest. So please sign up for this. And thank you for watching Moonshots, and cannot wait to see you again on the next episode of Moonshots.
Woo.
Thank you.
You're awesome.